Welcome as we try something different, right? This time around, because we got through the Rashis on Korach, it was my intention to take a look at the other part of the book that we've been looking at, which is the Torah Tamima, and actually looking now at Baruch Halevi Epstein, the Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein's commentary on the Torah. And so we're into this on Korach, and I'm going to share the screen, and before I'll say the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, and welcome to. And as I've said before, please, I am welcome comments, especially, if you like it, if you enjoy it, let me know. But if it's a little too challenging, also, perhaps let me know. There's so much that is written on this kind of material. At any rate, second verse, right? Nisi ha'eda. Let's take a look here. Back here, right. Vayakumu lifnei Moshe, they arose before Moses. Anashim and men. Generally, the word anashim refers to someone important, right? Significant people. Mibnei Yisrael, of the children of Israel. Chamisha v'matayim, 250 nisi'ei ada, princes, right? Officials, officers of the congregation, of the community. Kri'ei mo'ed. You see this word Edah. You can see the word mo'ed. The word mo'ed, in a sense, implies an appointment, right? Called to office. And we're going to see what Torah Tamima, how they deal with this. What is Kri'ei mo'ed? It's not such a simple Hebrew expression or a common Hebrew expression to try to understand. Anshe Shem, name, right? Renowned. So these were, I think what the Torah is trying to communicate to us is that these people who raised the mutiny against Moses and Aaron were all, they were significant people. This wasn't coming from the hoi polloi. This was coming from the select, right? Those people who were select. At any rate, Nisi Ada. And we're going to look at, this is in Sanhedrin. Here's the specific reference, how they interpret out these words. Nisi Ada. And again, nasi, right, which can mean president. It means someone who has some kind of high position, right? Nasi Eda, of the community. Meyuchadim sheba'eda, people who were distinguished in the community. Kri'ei mo'ed. So this is this unusual phrase. Shehayu yodim la'aber, they knew how to intercalate shanim, the years, v'likboa chadashim, and to designate months. So a little bit of background here, okay? And that is, of course, the Jewish calendar, which is both a lunar and solar calendar. Lunar, because the days of our months correspond. The first day of the month is the new moon. The 15th of the month is the full moon. And of course, the end of the month is as the moon changes again to become another new moon. So our months are based on the phases of the moon. And the only problem is that, by the way, and it takes 29 and a half days. It doesn't take an exact number of days for the moon to complete its cycle. And if you calculate quickly, 12 lunar months, if you multiply 29 and a half by 12, you get 354 days, 11 days short of a solar year. And for this reason, because the Jewish calendar is also dependent on the seasons, and the seasons are dependent on the Earth's position relative to the sun, they have to be able to somehow match up these lunar months with the solar years. And the way they do that is back before we had a figured out calendar, they used to look for signs of spring early on in Adar, because the first of the months is Nisan, and Nisan is the month that follows Adar. And if there weren't signs in nature that indicate that spring was springing, they would add another Adar onto the year, and that way Nisan would come in the springtime. So what happened was that there was a Greek by the name of Meton who figured out an exact number of lunar months corresponding to 19 solar years. And from this is figured out the current Jewish calendar with the 19-year cycle, and having 13 months, having that additional Adar, I believe 7 times. It's like the 3rd year, it's the 6th year, it's the 8th year, it's the 11th year, it's the 14th year, it's the 17th year, and the 19th year in the cycle. That is when we get a 13th month added to. So what we're saying here, after hearing that mouthful from me, we're saying that these people understood how to determine whether or not the year needed to be intercalated, meaning that additional month. And not only that, but going back to the fact that lunar months are 29 and a half and just a fraction more days each month, they knew how to determine the new moon. And that also, because of that, that the fact that it's not an exact number of days for that lunar cycle requires a certain level of expertise. And what this is saying is that these people were educated, they were knowledgeable, they weren't fools. So this is all sort of setting up and giving you the framework in which this mutiny is taking place.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Okay, I'm going to silence Siri. I need to do that. That's what that's reminding me to do. Okay, here goes. All right. So that hopefully won't happen again. Let's see if I can catch myself as to where we are here. Right. Okay. Anshe Shem, right? So men of name, Shaya Lahem Shem, they were famous. They had a reputation, a name, Bechol Haolam, in the whole world. And of course, I don't know that we need to take that absolutely literally, but it means they were, let's say, internationally known, right? These were not people, these people were truly distinguished, and we've broken down and deconstructed the nature of their distinction. So that's the Talmud. Sanhedrin is doing that analysis. And now we notice this little footnote here, this little hey, and we're going to go to Torah Tamima. This is Baruch Halevi Epstein's own reflections on this. Yitachen, it would appear. So he's standing back a pace or two and saying, well, what is this about? Why is this happening? Why are we even having this?
Can I interrupt and ask?
Yes, please.
What was the text that you were reading above was from where?
Sanhedrin, right here.
It's from Sanhedrin, but who pulled it out?
Okay.
Who pulled it out and put it under the name of Torah Tamima?
Baruch Halevi Epstein. He's the one who has this encyclopedic knowledge of this of the rabbinic material. The man is brilliant. He knows it, and he And he, by the way, this isn't the way it's necessarily. In other words, if you went to Sanhedrin page 110a and looked there, you might not find the language, quite the language here, because what Baruch Halevi Epstein did was he took the language of the Gemara and tried to simplify it a little bit so that, we wouldn't have to struggle with issues of trying to understand the language of the Gemara itself.
So he selected
Oh, yes, he did.
the quotations from the Gemara, and then what's below the line is his explanation or commentary.
That's
Okay.
right. Right. And in some ways it's an explanation, but very often it goes much deeper than that. And that's what's charming about his commentary. And the fact that he has it organized so that it follows the flow of the Torah itself, of the Torah verses. So it's from all over the place. And it isn't just from the Talmud. I think he sometimes quotes midrashim. His knowledge of rabbinic material is staggering. So he says,
Okay.
yeah, yitachen, it would appear, delon nechale, that he wasn't comfortable. In other words, the author of this commentary in Sanhedrin wasn't comfortable lefaresh kru'ei moed shehu stam toar. He wasn't comfortable explaining kru'ei moed, okay, that it's simply a description, right? That it's sort of basically nothing more than a description of these people, like distinguished, renowned, etc., etc. Because clearly, when we read this, that they were the ones who knew how to intercalate, etc. It goes well beyond just simply describing these people as renowned. It goes into much more specific. And he says, apparently, the author of this particular commentary in Sanhedrin wasn't comfortable with that. There was a reason, and here we go. Here's the reason: the hakvar kativ nesi'ei aida, because it already says that they were the elect of the community. So kru'ei moed, which sounds very similar to called out in the community, right? Veyesh lomar. So we could say, Betam kol ela hadrashot, that when you look at all these interpretations that we're looking at right now in this particular one that we read, lahorot leva'e olam, that the whole point of this deconstruction, right, and the basic meaning of the Torah, pulling it out from the Torah, is to teach leva'e olam, in other words, any people, human beings, to teach people ad kama gadol eres hamachloket, the degree to which the idea of mutiny, but maybe machloket isn't always mutiny, dissension, right? Something like that. The degree to which that dissension is poisonous. Eris is a poison. The poison of dissension, to the point, she'anshe mala, that people who were worthy people, these were really, as you've seen from what we've said up to this point, right? Nistabchu ba, they became entangled in it. And in some ways, I feel there's so much to this in terms of human nature and what we are seeing now being played out on the United States national stage, right? That there's something that went into, the Tea Party and that whole starting of that dynamic within government that basically set apart and created partisanship, etc., and has led to where things are now. And it's a poison. It's a poison. So I'm not here, obviously, to go into the political scene itself, but I just felt this in some ways, there is so much, here we are talking about a community that is divided up, right, through this action on the part of Korach. Okay.
There's an interesting essay from Rabbi Sachs that I read not long ago, where he talks about the significance of the holidays well, with Shabbat.
Yes.
Shabbat is sort of an echo of creation,
Right.
and it comes around every 7 days, and there's no need to calculate when Shabbat is coming.
Uh-huh.
With the holidays, there is.
Yes.
There's a lot of human input that goes into the calendar when it comes to the holidays. And that's why these people, these Kriyei Moed, were so important. They were like mirroring God's actions when well, I can't do justice to Rabbi Sachs, but there's when people talk about partnering and creation and all that, and that was the role of the Jewish people and the leaders of the Jewish people setting up the holidays. They
Yes.
were God's counterparts in a sense, because they were setting the dates.
Right.
So there was and if you were actually educated enough and intelligent and trained well enough and to do that, then you must have been at the top, really the among the elite.
Right. So it was actually the great Sanhedrin that had to declare the new moons, and you're reminding me of an interpretation that my late father, Zichrono Livracha, taught me. If you look at the end of the festival Kiddush, it's the last little bracha says, Mekadesh HaShabbat. If the festival occurs on Shabbat, Mekadesh HaShabbat Yisrael v'Hazmanim, right? Who sanctified the Shabbat, Israel, and the festivals. And the question is, why that order? Why doesn't it say HaShabbat or Mekadesh Yisrael, HaShabbat Vazmanim? I mean, we can understand why Shabbat comes first. Its level of holiness and sanctity is greater than that of the festivals, which are also holy. But the fact that you're allowed to cook on the festivals, but you're not allowed to cook on Shabbat, is part of that way in which we're saying that the level of holiness of Shabbat and sanctification is greater. But why Israel in the middle? This was what my dad was teaching me. And he said the reason is because the Shabbat is a Shabbat regardless of the Jewish people. It happens, like you said, every 7 days. But it is the Jewish people who have to declare the festivals. They're the ones who actually have to declare what days are holy. And that's why Israel comes next, and then the Zmanim come third. And that's why order.
Yeah, same idea.
And
That's
it,
wonderful.
it's echoed throughout. Yes, the Talmud itself talks about Ele Moadei. If you look at the beginning, this is in Numbers again in Parshat Pinchas, where they talk about the festivals, and they talk about the fact that if you look at the language there, the language suggests that it's the Jewish people who declare the festivals. And for me, the echo is that to the degree to which we either ignore the festivals and don't observe them, or we do observe them, that in fact, and there's echoes behind that too, that there's great blessing, an extraordinary amount of blessing that accrues to the actual observance of the festivals, because there's a tendency, and I've seen it myself in congregational work, that there are people who are very meticulous about attending and observing Shabbat, but they don't show up for Shavuot or Sukkot or the festival services of Pesach. They show up for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, but they don't show up for the other festivals. It's interesting. Just the level of connection between what is divine and what is human, and that flow between, the pulse in between those two areas of the divine and the human. So, but thank you, Shira Beth. That was a lovely drush that you cited from Rabbi Sachs. Truly,
Yes, and also for me, there's a personal connection, because the synagogue in North Minneapolis that my grandfather went to was called Mikra Kodesh.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's, I never understood that name until I read that essay.
Yes. Yes, called holy, right. Yeah. I think that's also Shabbat though, also is it's we have to declare it holy, but Shabbat is holy regardless, whether or not
Yeah.
we observe it. Okay, we're gonna plow into the next one here, and it's also totally delightful. So just this the approach is the way he personalizes, and is able to think this through, and how you can see how it stimulates his mental juices, right? Okay. Vayishma Moshe. Okay, so we need to do the verses in the Torah here, right? Vayikalu al Moshe al Haron. They gathered together. They formed a crowd, right, against Moses and Aaron. Vayomru alehem, and they said to them, to Moses and Aaron, Rav lachem, you're taking on too much, right? You're exalting yourselves. Ki chol ha'edah kulam kadoshim, because the entire community are all holy. They're all as sacred as you are. They're all as special as you are. They're all as significant as you are. You're not anymore. Uvatocham Hashem, and not only that, God is present in their midst, in the midst of all of them. Umadua titnasu al kahal Adonai. So, for what reason are you exalting yourselves over the community of God? Right? In other words, there's a suggestion, right, in this sense that they're actually going against God's will, right? Korach and his people are trying to say, this isn't what God wants. God's in all our midst. Why do you think you've got the special place? Okay. Vayishma Moshe. Moses heard this. Vayipol al panav, and he fell on his face. Right. He was overwhelmed by this critique. Okay. Torah Tamima. Vayishma Moshe. Moses heard. So the Gemara, the Talmud is saying, Mashmu Shama. What do you mean? What did he hear? What was this hear thing, this thing that he heard? What was the specifics? What did he hear? Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said, Amar Rabbi Yonatan. And he said this in the name of Rabbi Yonatan. Shama, he heard, Shechashduhu me'eshet ish. They were holding him in suspicion of essentially adultery. They held him in suspicion of adultery. Shene'emar, how do we know this? Of course, again, beautiful, rigorous nature of the Talmud. Shene'emar, as it states, Vayikanu, this is from Psalm 106, right? Again, look at this beautiful knowledge of the breadth of Jewish information, right? So this is from the Bible, and it's Psalm 106, which is a historical psalm. It goes through the history of the Jewish people, that early history, and it says, "Vayikanu leMoshe b'machaneh," and they were jealous of Moses in the camp. So to hold in jealousy, deep jealousy. Melamed, and this teaches us, we can infer from it, shekol echad ve'echad, that every individual, kine et isho Moshe, was jealous of Moses, or had a spirit of jealousy regards to his wife and Moses. And how do we know this? In other words, when we say kinah, this is the word that, remember when we were dealing with Sotah, the Parsha of Sotah, this was the word that we used, right? The husband is suspicious, holds his wife in suspicion that she's had relations with another man. So we got that, but how do we know that? Shene'emar, it says in Parsha Ki Tisa, this is back in Exodus, Umoshe yikach et ha'ohel, and Moses took the tent, v'nata lo michutz lamachaneh, and he pitched the tent outside the camp, outside the encampment. So, all right, I'm not going to be able to get through the entire Torah Tamima on this, but there's some beautiful, as he ponders, wait a second, there's some questions that this particular issue raises, and maybe you're wondering about them to yourselves. He says right off the bat, Eine muvuar. It isn't clarified, it's not so clear. Efo merumaz chesed zeh, or chashad zeh. Where is this particular suspicion, right? Hinted, alluded to, b'machloket. In this, in other words, if you're reading Parshat Korach, and we were just reading what we read, where would we even begin to imagine that what was going on here was that Moses was being told that he was suspected of adultery, right? Would we have ever inferred that? And he's saying it's not so clear, right? That's an understatement, right? If Sharlomar, and you could say, Al pi ma shekatuv besota, by what is, this is so interesting, by what is written in Tractate Sota, page 4b, kol, this is what's said, kol hamitga'eh, anyone who exalts himself, lesof, in the end, nechshal be'eshet ish, he's going to winding up committing adultery. And, you know, I was reading, there's this, I can't think of the title of the book, but it's a book about World War I, which was taking place around the same time as women's liberation, okay? And there he talks about these people who were leading the British Army at the time, and basically they were involved in adulterous. They were openly, they were married, and these people were taking another man's wife and spending time and living with them, right? And I believe even Admiral Lord Nelson had a mistress, but who was married. And it's so interesting, and to the degree to which this kind of thing takes place nowadays, and the deep knowledge that our ancestors had of human nature. Okay. The Korach va'adato, and Korach, we'll just do a teeny bit more. Korach and his community, Helinu al Moshe, they complained with regards to Moses, ki mitnasehu alehem, right? What we do read is we just read it, how Moses is lording it over them, right? How he's exalting himself. That's what they was accusing him of. Ukamosha amru, and just as they said, Umadua titnasu v'gomer. He's quoting the text here. And why are you exalting yourself? Ki tistarer aleinu. That's again a quote, that you lorded over us. Ukadei le'amet divrehem. And in order to justify this particular accusation that they had of Moses, chashduhu gam be'onish haba l'raglei haga'ava. So they suspected him, or they accused him also of the kind of punishment, or the onesh usually means punishment, right? Or the consequences here that come at the foot of ga'ava, arrogance, kamavuar, as we just mentioned. And this is where I'm going to stop today. And with God's help, we will continue tomorrow. So I'm going to take this and put it in here. And let's see if
it's a little unclear at this point whether Korach seriously, were they seriously suspicious, or were they just adding a kind of false accusation that they knew was
okay. I know. It's a great question. And I don't know that that's so clear here. Okay. Look, you can say that you know how people rationalize, and I think that it is a rationalization that they were aware of this, because remember, they were knowledgeable people, and I think what they did was, given the fact that there is this notion, this idea that people who are arrogant wind up quite possibly committing adultery, and so they felt that that was something that would sit well, that it wasn't an accusation that they would have to struggle to justify. So I think this is my guess, that the Rav Baruch Halevi Epstein is saying that basically they were able to pin it on this because of the background that goes along with it, so that this rationalization would have some legs to it. That's what I think.
Uh-huh. Well, what about putting his tent outside the camp is no kind of evidence.
No, we got to go on with. He's going to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try to.
No, hopefully you'll join us, because
I
we've
hope
got
so.
to go on. He says ve'eneme uvar tam haraya. He says it's not so clear the reasoning of this proof. So I can't do that now, but we've got all this to do to get
Okay.
to it. Okay, he's going to break it down. We are not dealing with a slouch, clearly, right? This man is top drawer. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, till tomorrow. Okay, I'm gonna stop the share and stop the recording, and let me. I may have to stop the recording first. Sorry. Okay, 1 second. Oh, there we are.